Welcome to Crossroads. While Congress is still considering the SAFE Act on election integrity, President Donald Trump has issued a new order and he's made new requirements for the elections and taken a really interesting path with this. Also, another big topic right now, the U.S. Supreme Court is weighing a key case. Is birthright citizenship legal? Is it not? We'll find out soon. Another topic also, the UK. Well, they've suddenly done an about face, and they say they're going to stop arresting people for online speech, at least stop targeting them. Now, I'll be talking about these topics and a lot more today, so make sure to hit the like button, leave a comment. Let's get started. All right, big story. Congress is still trying to decide on the SAFE Act. That's the whole election integrity thing, mostly around like voter ID or citizenship verification. President Donald Trump, though, has kind of taken his own method with this. He issued a new order and put requirements in place for elections. Now, as part of this, what it does, Trump has put stricter rules on mail-in ballots and also created a database that can be used by the states on eligible voters. Now, this is how Trump described it when signing his executive order. Watch this.
You have in front of you an executive order that deals with a number of issues relating to election integrity. As you've consistently identified, two of the biggest problems we have with election integrity in this country are, one, inaccurate voter rolls that allow ineligible people to vote in various federal and state elections all over the country. And secondarily, you've consistently identified that vote by mail in this country has become rife with fraud. People returning ballots who aren't eligible to return ballots, ballots being sent to people who aren't confirmed to be eligible voters. So what this executive order is going to do is, one, we're going to take federal data. We're going to ensure that each state's election officials are provided with a comprehensive view of who the eligible voters in their jurisdiction actually are, allowing them to properly verify that everybody voting in their elections is legally able to vote. And then it orders the Postmaster General and the U.S. Postal Service to take bold new measures to verify that ballots both being sent to people are being sent to people who are eligible to vote, and then that ballots being returned are being properly returned by eligible voters only. And we believe that combined, the measures in this executive order will help secure elections in the future and ensure that the many abuses of our election system in the past aren't repeated in future elections.
Now, that could actually be really big, depending on how it goes. Basically, new systems that add some additional security to mail-in ballots, help make states, able to check whether there are eligible voters. Let me explain why that matters in my take. First of all, there's been a debate around mail-in ballots. I think Trump understands that without Congress acting on it, there's not a lot they can do, right? The current argument right now is, to what extent do states get to determine their laws on elections? Now, the real irony was, I think it used to be understood constitutionally the state legislature basically had most of the power with the elections. During the Biden administration, or like the challenges post-2020, what came down from the top levels was basically that state legislatures do not have the amount of power over election security that constitutionally a lot of us believe they did. There's a lot more power with the local judges, and there's a lot more power with the local governors. Now, in terms of what Trump is doing right now, he's effectively trying to put national standards on security in place for the elections. Republicans are trying to do this. Democrats are arguing that puts additional barriers in place, like, if you have to show ID, fewer people are going to vote because it's racist to show ID to vote. It's not racist to show ID to buy alcohol or shovel snow or, browse the internet, as they're trying to do right now. But it's racist for voting, which is the big issue right now, okay? So the real thing they're trying to do right now is debate over voter ID. Now, Donald Trump understands something else, which is, you can't really change the laws, but you can create additional, federal level services to inform local governments about maybe problems, about, hey, there's probably fraud here, or put additional systems in place within the Postal Service. And this is an interesting way he's doing it. Put additional systems in place in the Postal Service to help make sure that ballots are being transferred properly, that these are being weighed against existing records of eligible voters, and he's kind of solving it at that level. And if you understand kind of the bigger picture of it, this is kind of I mean, some people are going to hate this, but in terms of what Trump wants, it's kind of genius. Let me explain why. What he's doing effectively is creating a database who is legally able to vote, who is not. Now, you could argue whether you like that or not, okay? Like, I'm not telling you what to believe on this. But what he's doing through that, he's making the onus on the governors and on the local governments. And if there is fraud, it means that they allowed it to take place knowingly. That's one of the reasons why it matters. It also means that the process of auditing, if, for example, there's a challenge to the election, they can just look at, okay, we provided you with information on eligible voters, non-eligible voters. If you allowed ineligible voters to vote and you were told about it, it means you allowed it knowingly. That creates some legal threats to an extent against against states when they're trying to, run their elections. This actually creates a degree of ownership over voter integrity at the state level. You could potentially see people face criminal charges. I mean, depending on how they enforce this. The other thing that Trump is doing with this is by going to the postal services. He's making it so, I lived in New York during the 2020 elections. I was in actually Jackson Heights, AOC's district. And I can say at my address, I received, I believe, 2 or 3 ballots that were not mine. And this was happening to a lot of people. And what was happening effectively is because local, states are not clearing their voter rolls. You have people registered to addresses who no longer live at those addresses. You have people who moved out of state. You have people who died. And basically, because of universal mail-in ballots, every single person who was registered received a ballot. Now, there are a lot of allegations going around whether that was a threat or not. One of the allegations was, if you have a house with people who are not eligible to vote or just are very emotionally agitated, and 3 ballots show up at their doorstep and they're blank, they have people's names on them, and then you have ballot drop boxes which are anonymous, you're kind of trusting them with no accountability, trusting them to not do something dishonest and fill those out and vote, right? There was a lot of trust in that election. The other thing that happened was that, at the Postal Service and everything else, states not clearing their voter rolls, if you were to solve this at the level of the Postal Service, where the Postal Service is actually checking ballots and saying eligible, ineligible, checking against existing databases, maybe even using AI, I don't know how they're going to do it, it actually could filter out voter rolls through the use of the actual Postal Service, which is a really interesting way of doing it, because while the states run their elections, the Postal Service is federal. The Postal Service is federal. And so this is using federal power to not kind of overreach into state sovereignty. I'd imagine there's going to be challenges on this. It's going to be interesting. But they found a really interesting, what I would call a loophole, frankly, right? What I would call a loophole in the system to allow federal security on elections that does affect state ballots and so on. It's a very interesting move with this. In the chat, I'm seeing, this is Eric Red 721. You're saying we should get off electronic ballot and move to paper ballots, double verification. I would actually agree. I know some people say, well, paper ballots aren't feasible. America is too big. I was actually in Taiwan during their presidential elections, and I was, there reporting on kind of security and about, China threatening Taiwan and stuff. I did a feature on it if you're ever interested in watching it. And it was actually really interesting to see how Taiwan ran their elections. We had some discussions on Primetime, another show, I do with some colleagues every Friday. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And we were talking about, Taiwan elections versus America elections versus everything else. And it was very interesting, right? It was very interesting because effectively with the Taiwanese elections, it's a system based on mistrust. You're not trusting people to be honest. You're not trusting people to do everything. And so because there's mistrust, right, people are people are kind of watching for things that could go wrong. So the onus is on, the systems to demonstrate honesty, right? They're demonstrating honesty. And so because of that, there's a lot of transparency. In the Taiwanese elections, they have the boxes. Everybody can go in, sit there, watch them count the ballots. You have multiple people. They take a ballot, hold it up, read it, hand it off to another person. They document it, read it. Another person has a big chalkboard, show it, read it. They write it on the chalkboard. Everybody in the room can see it. And every single ballot is counted. Every single ballot is shown, and by the end of the night, within a few hours, every vote in the country is counted, and the new president is announced. Now, some people would say, geez, well, that's not really, that wouldn't work in America. We're a lot bigger than Taiwan, obviously. It's a misunderstanding of how elections are run. Taipei in Taiwan, a major city, is about the same size as most American cities. In the United States, it's not like the federal government at the top level is like running the elections in every single county of the entire nation. No, the elections are run at the state level, and you have it broken up into parts. If you were to count the ballots like that in Taiwan, it would look exactly the same. You're not having some massive system counting the ballots. It's being done by small little offices all across the country, and in those, again, could easily, very easily, have the same exact type of security, same exact type of transparency, and yes, paper ballots that Taiwan has. Would that get rid of all the problems? Probably not, but that's also why they have transparency. And I think the problem a lot of Americans have with the lack of paper ballots is when something is not visible, when there's algorithms and technologies and foreign parts and internet connections, it's fair enough that you'd say, well, geez, how can I verify that it's real or not? And I think that's creating a lot of doubt in the minds of people. All right, another news, something else happening. We could soon find out whether or not birthright citizenship is legal. And all of this after a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. Something big is happening right now with the Supreme Court. They are weighing a case. Is birthright citizenship legal or illegal? This could be huge because, well, a huge part of the population of the United States is children of illegal aliens. It's actually a good part of our population at this point. It's become that big. And the Supreme Court right now is determining, well, should that continue? What happens to people who are children of illegal aliens and are citizens because of that? What happens, right? The Epoch Times says this. It says the U.S. Supreme Court on April 1st will consider whether President Donald Trump's executive order excluding the children of illegal immigrants and legal temporary visitors from automatic birthright citizenship is constitutional. Now, it notes that Trump, who has frequently used the term anchor babies Commonly used, it's a bit of a derogatory term though, to refer to children born in the United States to illegal immigrant parents, issued executive order on this, right? It's Executive Order 14160 on January 20, 2025, in hopes of ending the practice. And Donald Trump's executive order, which is being challenged, it's about to be considered by the justices at the Supreme Court. It notes it was blocked by lower courts. Let me explain a bit more what's happened. We'll go into it. It says here, U.S. Solicitor General, that's D. John Sauer, said in the government petition that automatic citizenship, quote, operates as a powerful incentive for illegal migration, presents national security concerns, and has spawned an industry of modern birth tourism by which foreigners travel to the United States solely for the purpose of giving birth here and obtaining citizenship for their children. Huge issue, by the way. It happens a lot in the southern states. Illegal aliens go to Mexico, they cross the border illegally, they go to the emergency room, give birth. If they do that, Americans have to shoulder the cost of it because they don't. A lot of them actually game the system of emergency rooms. So they get free health care, they give birth, and the kid's an American citizen. Then they go back to Mexico, the kid's an American citizen, or they stay here and stay with family. And once the kid's an American citizen, they can actually register the kid for all kinds of government programs. They can get welfare, everything else, and we're stuck with a lot of money and also a system that, frankly, games the American people quite a bit. It is a problem that illegal alien households, where you do have mixed citizenship like this, about 60% of them are on at least some form of government subsidy. So they're getting some kind of government program, some kind of welfare. Now it says here about 8% of all births in the United States in 2023 were to illegal immigrants and legal temporary visitors. Further in it says this, how the justices' rule may turn on what subject to the jurisdiction thereof in the citizenship clause means. Innocent Michael O'Neill, Legal Affairs Vice President at Landmark Legal Foundation, said the order correctly interprets the phrase. It says evidence shows the ratifiers of the 14th Amendment intended it to apply to political jurisdiction rather than territorial jurisdiction. Told us to Epoch Times, and he said, quote, mere presence isn't enough. He said you need to owe some political allegiance to the United States of America in order for you to have birthright citizenship today. And notes also Chris Hajic, Deputy Counsel at the Federation for American Immigration Reform, suggested the executive order was, quote, 95% constitutional, meaning Trump's order, but went too far in excluding the children of temporary workers on visas and foreign students. So what's really going on with this? Briefly, I should mention, as of right now, the general kind of consensus is the Supreme Court was at least not fully in agreement with Donald Trump. Trump's argument is basically this. 14th Amendment was made for freed slaves. It was basically because, after slaves in the United States were given freedom, there was an argument on whether or not they should be given American citizenship. Should they be sent to Africa? And that was a real argument. I'm not saying that was the argument at the time, right? A lot of them wanted to have them sent to Liberia, which was set up as kind of the friendly African colony that would have all the repatriated, former African slaves. And the counter-argument to that, which is the one that won, was that no, these are American citizens. We're giving them freedom. They're born here. A lot of them, their parents were born here, and to send them to Africa and to deny them, that is not right. And the argument was, you're born here, you're a citizen. And so citizenship was given to the children of freed slaves. That was the basis of the 14th Amendment. Later on, this turned into an argument around, well, what about just migrants in particular, right? So the current argument on birthright citizenship came from a Chinese national, the child of Chinese nationals. It was in San Francisco, it was determined that his parents were subjects of the Emperor of China, And they were here. The important note is they were in the United States legally, not illegally. They were legal residents of the United States here, and he was born here. Should that child, born to legal immigrants, but still subjects of the Emperor of China, be given citizenship? The conclusion was yes. And so that basis has been used to give citizenship to the children of all foreign nationals, illegal immigrants, whatever else. Trump's argument with it is this. He's saying, okay, you could argue, based on historical precedent, that if you're a legal resident, or if you are, again, the child of a freed slave, I guess, which you don't have anymore, then yes, you are an American citizen. But if you're a non-legal resident, if your parents are illegal aliens, if they come here, if there's, they have a big thing of birth tourism now, where Chinese nationals are traveling to Saipan and you have entire industries set up, you're talking like 1 million people defrauding the system, and the children can then vote or go back to China and still vote in our elections through mail-in ballots. What is the legality of that, right? When you have mass fraud taking place, when you have 60% populations on welfare, like, how do you deal with this? And so this is the argument. Now, in terms of the Supreme Court, in my personal take, they're probably not going to be doing anything close to taking away citizenship from people who have birthright citizenship. I don't think the Trump administration wants that either. If you are a birthright citizen, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Personally, that's my conclusion on this. That's the way I think this is going to go. I think also for people who are the children of permanent residents, there's going to be a big argument around like people who are here on work visas or student visas. If you come here as a student and you have a kid, are your kids citizens? I think that's going to be one of the big areas of debate. I think the conclusion will be, if you're under any kind of legal residency, work visa, green card, student visa, they might still give it to you, because that's or even maybe travel visa. I mean, we'll see how far they interpret it. They might still give you citizenship, and they might uphold that. I think the real argument, and this is the one Trump wants, is whether or not someone here violating the law, an illegal alien, can their kids be deemed citizens? And so there's a lot of categories of migration, temporary residency, that are separate from the issue of illegal migration. And I really think that's going to be the one that Trump's really going for, and we'll see to what extent that deals with it. The other problem you have, though, is that doesn't address problems of birth tourism. Because what you do have is a lot of birth tourism. The problems exposed recently by Peter Schweizer in his book, warning about the problem of like China, the Chinese Communist Party intentionally doing this, running systems to massively defraud the American migration system and citizenship programs. It will not deal with that, because they're actually using legal tourism, visa processes of temporary travel stuff in order to defraud the system. Like, to what extent can you deal with that? That's the big problem with this. TMA in the chat, I see you're mentioning this. You're saying, Josh, regarding the Chinese companies bringing the pregnant women over to birth an American, can that be considered fraud and pursued under the new czars? You're talking about the anti-fraud coalition they established. It would be hard, because this ties into gray areas of legal systems, right? So when someone defrauds the system, that's when they lie about something. It's when they're knowingly defrauding something, and they're doing it using illegal means. If you have something that's 100% legal, even if it's being used in kind of nefarious ways, it's not a crime. It's a loophole within the legal system. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who kind of manipulate loopholes in legal systems. There are a lot of loopholes in legal systems. So for example, if America has a system where we allow for birthright citizenship for people on travel visas, and you set up a travel agency with the intent of defrauding that, I don't know. Can you take away the citizenship? They can probably shut down the organizations doing it, but I don't think they can end citizenship for the people who are doing it. We can give a clear case on this, right? We can use a clear case on this. In California, there was like a tourism group from China, and they had a hotel system. It was like a spa, like, you know, get like a month-long getaway or something like that. Come to America, and it was for pregnant women from China. And they would bring them to the United States. They'd take care of them. They'd give birth here in the United States. The kids would become citizens, and that was like part of the travel program. It was part of the package. The company got shut down, but they're not taking away citizenship from those kids. Like, you know what I mean? And so it's like the company was accused of fraud. The company was accused of manipulating this. The people who did it, it did not extend to them. And so I think that's kind of the gray area with it. Yeah, so it's complicated, right? It's complicated stuff. Again, as of now, the Supreme Court appears to be against Trump's interpretation. And so it is currently, as it looks right now, we'll see where it goes. It looks like they're not going to give Trump what he wants on this. We'll see to what extent, because that's the argument. To what extent will they allow this, right? That's the question. Now, on that topic also, though, the Department of Justice is getting rid of a program that used to give legal assistance to people facing deportation. CBS News says this. It says the Justice Department has quietly gutted a more than 60-year-old program created to ensure that low-income and indigent immigrants can receive competent and affordable legal representation. Multiple sources with direct knowledge of the matter tell CBS News. Now, take it for what you will. Anonymous sources, CBS News. But this actually does sound like something Trump would be doing, and I'll explain why in a bit, but let me show you what it says. It says the Recognition and Accreditation Program, which is part of the Justice Department's Executive Office for Immigration Review, accredits non-attorneys who work for largely faith-based legal advocacy organizations such as Catholic Charities. I should note Catholic Charities is one of the NGOs that was helping facilitate mass migration. And when I was doing my own investigations, they're one of the big names that came up. And another group, it says Jewish Family Services. So they are authorized to assist immigrants on everything from naturalization petition to representation in DOJ's immigration courts. It says also, the handful of senior attorneys who operate the program were abruptly reassigned to work in immigration courts last week, leaving in place only 2 support staff with no legal authority to approve or renew accreditation applications, sources with direct knowledge said. Basically, the Justice Department had systems set up to help give representation, legally to people facing deportation. Or, just certain categories of migrants when they're facing deportation. Now, in my personal take, this probably ties in with some of the other Supreme Court determinations on legal challenges to deportations. The current interpretation is this. If you are facing deportation, you do not have the ability to sue or to block it to the extent that an American citizen would. There are some categories where you could still challenge it, but your ability to do so is very, very limited. Basically, a lot of the authority is on the deportation authorities. So it's on, Border Patrol or ICE, basically. They get a lot of authority on this. You have very little power to challenge it. That was one of the big cases for Trump, because if you're deporting, a lot of people, 1 million, 2 million, whatever it is, right? And you're facing every single person with that is legally challenging it. And you have huge organizations set up to fund those challenges and everything else. Or another thing, if they do not have the ability to hire get legal representation, what is the law in the United States? It means that you have to get a public defender. we talked about this on Primetime recently, again, another show we do on Fridays. There's an issue right now in the United States. If you want to make a legal case, because the Constitution guarantees you the right to a fair trial and so on, meaning you have to be provided with a lawyer. So if you don't have the money for it, they need to legally provide you with a public defender. That is under the Constitution. So what happens if the limited public defenders are not available? What has been happening in the United States is people are being pardoned. They're being let off. And so you have people facing pretty major crimes, major charges, who are being let off the hook because there are not enough public defenders to give them representation, and they don't have the financial means to hire a lawyer themselves. And so what you would have without that, again, Supreme Court determination, is millions of people allegedly, possibly facing deportation, saying, I don't have the money for this, give me a public defender, and probably being pardoned because there are not enough public defenders to go around. That was the issue with it. So now the Justice Department is getting rid of an organization within it that used to help provide these services. Again, this is an anonymous source to CBS News. Is it really happening? We don't fully know. We can't fully confirm it. But it is in line with the other stuff taking place. So because of that, I do think this is legitimate. And it does sound like something Trump would do, frankly. In the chat, I see Acoustic Kitty. You're saying, we are working with the system we have, not the system we want. That's a good point, too. This is another issue, and that's a good point, right? The unfortunate thing with any kind of legal system is it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to have a system that can deal with every form of injustice. You're always going to have loopholes. You're always going to have people taking advantage of loopholes. You're always going to have some people in the gray areas that they might be innocent who, fall into the justice system. It's a really terrible thing to have happen to you. I can tell you on a personal level, I never faced anything like this, but I was accused of crimes I didn't commit before, back when I was like a teenager. And I kind of brought it on myself. Basically, I used to have a lot of kind of punk friends, and I was, asked to be searched by police one time. And me being more of a constitutionalist, I was like, well, officer, what's your probable cause? I don't believe you have probable cause to search me. And they didn't like hearing that, because, or they're like, I'm going to search you. And I'm like, well, are you asking me or are you telling me? Because if you're asking me, the answer is no. If you're telling me, go ahead. But if you're asking me, no, I believe in upholding my constitutional rights. I'm not going to let you do something you don't have the legal right to do. They didn't like hearing that, and they actually started like following me, as I was told, actually. Showing people photos of me. Do you know this kid? And so I know what it's like to be targeted by the justice system when you didn't do anything wrong, right? Again, nothing happened with that in the end because my only thing is I was probably a bit suspicious because I was more of a constitutionalist. You could argue I brought it on myself. I brought it on myself by being like, no, I'm not going to let you illegally search me, But my point in saying it is this. My point in saying, no, Crash Bandit it was in New Jersey. It was in a really upscale community in New Jersey that doesn't like hearing that from punk kids, you know what I mean? Basically. Anyways, my point in saying it is this. There are people who face charges of crimes they did not commit. When you're dealing with deportations, you're going to have some good people deported. It's not like every person who gets deported is like a horrible MS-13 criminal. You're going to have a lot of hardworking, good people be deported. If you're dealing with, I personally know people who are here on amnesty, who are facing persecution, in particular in China, who actually were not able to, stay in the United States because the Trump administration is being very, they're really tightening things, actually. They're making it very hard to stay here. I know people who, they didn't have to go back to China, but they had to go to, I think, third countries. I don't know exactly where they went. And these are good people. These are law-abiding, straight A student types, hardworking people who were not able to stay in the United States because of the very tough laws on migration. Was that right? I mean, you can argue it, right? America's just enforcing a very strict system on migration right now. In my personal take, those would be the kind of migrants we would want. I'm not like an anti-migration guy by any means. And then the problem is, on the other side, you do have a lot of people who are dishonest. You have a lot of people who come here and they commit crimes. You have a lot of people who game the system. You have a lot of people who know there's loopholes in it. And then you have a lot of political organizations that manipulate those loopholes for political purposes. They know those are in place, and so they use them to the greatest extent possible. But this is the problem you're going to have with any kind of system of justice. Like, can we name any system of justice in the entire world that has ever been able to completely navigate all of these technicalities? The problem with written law is you will always have loopholes. You will always have loopholes. And if you're going by a strict interpretation of written law, it's very by the book, and it's sometimes overly strict. The other option to that is like spirit of the law. A lot of the sheriffs in the United States are more spirit of the law. The UK, the United Kingdom, their legal system is very spirit of the law. I would argue that in the United States, the sheriffs tend to be a little more loose. In the UK, their interpretation of spirit of the law has traditionally been much more severe, unless you're a migrant, and until now. I'll explain in a minute. And so it's kind of, when you leave it up to interpretation, you're going to have other problems too. Then in America, we have a lot of different, let's say, safeguards. The jury, the judge, the jury, the prosecutors, your ability to challenge legal rulings. There's a lot of different tiers you can go through if you believe you're falsely accused. And so, it's a very complex system. I do believe the American system of justice, in my take, is the best in the world. I do think this is the best we're going to get. And I think if you look back at history, older forms of law were kind of up to the interpretation of the king. If you had a good king, because the king was kind of the judge in a lot of traditional societies, if you had a good king, you probably had a good legal system. If you had an unwise king, you probably had a very bad one. You probably had a very bad time. So, again, law will always have flaws, but we can only get the best we can make. And I do believe the American system is about the best as history has ever shown. Back on the topic of the United Kingdom, though. On another topic, guess what? I don't know, maybe hell froze over. I don't know. Something big happened, because guess what? The UK went from being, hey, chap, it looks like you made an offensive comment on Twitter, time to go to jail, to doing a complete about-face saying they're going to stop doing that. The UK has now come out and announced they're no longer going to be targeting people for what they say on the internet. The UK Home Office said this directly. They say, quote, "Police time will no longer be wasted investigating legal social media posts, freeing up officers to patrol the streets and tackle real crime." Huge deal. This is big. Let me explain what else they said. They said by scrapping non-crime hate incidents, which is interesting because, in the UK, hate speech is a crime. And so when they say non-crime hate incidents, it's a weird way of saying it. We can assume that it means they're no longer, it can mean that they're deeming, like, if your speech does not result in the committing of a crime, for example, because this is a bit of the way it's interpreted in the UK. They're arguing that hate speech is a dog whistle, that it's inspiring people to carry out hate crimes, that it's instigating, and that's kind of how they're arguing the basis of going after people for what they write on the internet. And so now they're saying by scrapping non-crime hate incidents, meaning your speech did not lead to the committing of a crime, They say we are balancing the protection of vulnerable communities. They're talking about the migrants, okay? While respecting free speech, they're saying. And further in, they say, over recent years, guidance has failed to keep pace with the digital age, meaning people saying what they want to say on the internet, and has led to officers being called out to people's homes over insults and routine arguments. They say new measures announced today will introduce a new system that will prevent police from recording lawful free speech. Meaning, we documented what you say, old chap. Time to go to the old prison. Hope you enjoy your stay, but don't. It says forces will continue to ensure that reports from the public, which may lead to genuine harm, get the right response. And again, that's what I mentioned before, right? This is kind of the very... We talked before about spirit of the law versus word of the law, okay? Word of the law says, this is exactly what the law says, and we're going to throw the book at you or not, right? Word of the law says it's a very strict interpretation of the literal statement of what is written in the book, right? You're going to have a lot of loopholes with that. You're going to have some innocent people get thrown in prison. It's a very strict kind of, in America, we would call it like broken glass policing, meaning if you break a pane of glass, you're going to be charged to the full extent of the law. That's word of the law. In the United States, police departments, like under the governors, they tend to be more word of the law, just generally speaking. And this is not a Republican-Democrat thing. You know, we see it differently across the United States. You know, Mayor Giuliani in New York, he was known for being word of the law, broken glass policing. That's how he cleaned up New York. Very, very strict. The other is spirit of the law. Spirit of the law says, well, look, buddy, you were going 90 miles an hour in a 65, but your wife's in the back and she's going into labor. I understand, you know, please be careful. Let me escort you, but don't let it happen again. You know, that kind of stuff. If you get pulled over and you're like, sorry, officer, you know, I didn't mean to, I'll never do it again. And they say, all right, just, you know, be careful next time. Like, they let you off in a warning. That's spirit of the law. Spirit of the law says, this is a law-abiding citizen. They were having a bad day. They didn't hurt anybody. We're going to let them off the hook, right? That's spirit of the law. Or it's saying, look, okay, look, you're jaywalking in New York. If you ever been to New York, everybody does it, okay? There are so many jaywalkers in New York, and it's totally tolerated. And no police I've ever seen are going to go after anybody for it. That's spirit of the law. Yeah, they could go after you if they really wanted to, but they're not, because it's just the way things are and nobody really cares. That's spirit of the law. In the UK, they're going by this too, right? So in the UK, their system of justice is not really written law. It's a lot up to like historical precedent and interpretations and everything like that. They have a bit of a different legal system than we do because of that. Quite different, actually. But they would refer to their legal system as spirit of the law. Now, they've been going after people on a very large scale for what they say on the internet. If people make comments of disliking illegal immigrants or migrants, or if they make statements against terrorism, or if they talk about grooming gangs, like literally, you might go to prison. Like this is not an exaggeration. Like people by the thousands a year are going to prison in the United Kingdom for speech about as serious as what I just mentioned. Like it's been like that. The legal argument, right? The spirit of the law, which for them is more strict, not less strict, like it typically is in America. The spirit of the law interpretation in the UK has leaned towards a very extreme interpretation of the standard. And what's the standard there? Basically, speech could represent incitement. So if you tell people, go out and attack a migrant, and I'm not saying do that, I'm giving you an example, of course. If you tell people to go do that, and then someone goes and hurts a migrant, and you know they beat him up, or they something else, or you give a dog whistle to go out and riot on the streets, like for them, that's an act. That's again, it's like you incited that. You helped cause that, and for them, that is a crime. You will go to jail for that. Under the new announcement, they're still going to, if you say something and it leads to a crime, they will probably still arrest you and probably still charge you for it. But they say the overinterpretation was that a lot of speech was not leading to the committing of crimes. A lot of it was people going back and forth and having arguments on the internet. How many of you in the chat have had arguments on the internet where you said something kind of offensive to the other people? Look, I'm going to be blunt with you all. How many of you in the chat today have said things that will probably get you arrested in the UK? Okay? Like, I'm looking at you, Seymour. I'm just joking. I'm watching the chat, right? So, a lot of us have arguments on the internet, okay? And that doesn't mean you've committed a crime, right? So the UK is rolling things back a bit. They're rolling things back a bit, and they're not going to be doing that anymore. Now, part of this also ties into stuff that's been happening because of American pressure. And I think this is really why they're backing off of it. So, the State Department is actually launching an organization or a program, like a diplomatic program, where they're now actually documenting cases of migrant crime in Europe, including in the United Kingdom, right? European Union and the UK. They're actually documenting it. They're creating new systems of transparency for when migrant crime happens, for when people in these countries are punished for free speech. And the argument from the United States is two-tiered. One, they're saying that freedom of speech is a human right, and by violating that, the governments of Europe, and they're mostly targeting Europe right now. I'd be interested to see if they extend this to other countries like China especially, but they're mostly focused on Europe. They're saying freedom of speech is a basic human right, and by denying the citizens of these countries the right to, say offensive things sometimes, because that's the way freedom of speech works. You're not defending speech that nobody has a problem with. You're defending the freedom to say stupid things and mean things and everything else, and things a lot of us don't want to hear. That's freedom of speech, and that's the cost of it. They're saying if you deny that, it is a human rights abuse. And they're also creating systems where when the governments in these countries are punishing people or allowing crimes on the other side, rape gangs, terrorism, where you have people committing horrific crimes against domestic populations, we'll call them native populations. When you have migrants committing crimes against the native Europeans, the native populations of Europe, rape, torture, murder, stabbings, the United States is saying that is also a human rights abuse. When the native people of Europe are being abused by migrants, America is saying that is a human rights abuse. And the United States is even calling mass migration something that represents an existential threat to Western civilization, and they're saying it constitutes human rights abuse. Now, you can disagree with that. I'm just telling you what the literal State Department is saying, right? This is the actual policy diplomatically that America is extending to Europe right now. And so based on this pressure, it does seem the UK is doing an about-face. Was this about-face a response to the President of the United States and Marco Rubio? They're not saying it, but right now I'm saying that is probably why they're doing this. And interestingly, something else is happening, right? While they're doing this about-face on freedom of speech, they're also, in the UK, suddenly saying they're going to be going after migrant crime. Like, suddenly. Right after making that statement, they also said this. Let me show you the follow-up tweet they did on this. This is from the UK Home Office, okay? They say, our work with France has stopped 42,000 attempts by illegal migrants to make the journey across the channel. They say, while we finalize a new and improved UK-France deal, French law enforcement, intelligence, and military reservist officers will continue to patrol the beaches and stop illegal migrant crossings. Folks, this is the United Kingdom saying this. And they say, we will do whatever it takes to restore order and control at our borders. Has hell frozen over? Maybe. I never thought I'd see this from the UK, especially from the current administration, because, you know, the current administration tends to be very liberal, frankly. This is a big change in policy. They actually followed this up with other posts where they're talking about how there's like much less migration. They're reducing it by huge numbers. They're even talking about going after like the rape gangs, which is kind of crazy. I saw some posts from the UK. People are arguing that, okay, they're going after the rape gangs now, which it's like, geez, why are you going after free speech, but you're allowing that stuff to take place? And it's not just migrants, but a large part of it is, okay? You even have some like native, you know, Britons who are doing it, right? It's a big deal. They're actually really changing these standards right now. They're saying they're going to go after those gangs, and things are changing. Huge about face on law enforcement. In the chat, David Loesch is saying, is the reason for the UK changing the law on free speech due to the UK running out of jail/prison space? You know, they can always build more. They can always build more. Never underestimate the British will to build prisons. Which is why, of course, we decided to part ways with them. Martin McKenzie, you're saying, sadly, the UK has rejected their own long-standing system of freedom from which the USA was formed. It's an epic failure of a civilization. Well, I think they're changing, actually. You know, it is a difficult thing. You know, I went to the UK, was it last year? When I was doing the documentary on Charlie Kirk, we did some great interviews in the UK. Talking about Antifa and, you know, radicalism and stuff like that. You know, frankly, I liked it there. I think it's a great country, actually. It has that kind of like cozy cottage vibe to it. Like, I loved it. But it is a problem with their legal system, where British historically have been known to be a bit overly strict. Okay, like newsflash, right? The British have had a reputation of being overly strict in their interpretation of the law. That is why the United States decided that, you know, we don't really want to be friends for a little bit. We're kind of friends again, but we decided to put our friendship on hold. They could be a bit, you know, keep that stiff upper lip types and be a bit uptight. And, you know, they view us as the kind of rebellious little brother who causes a ruckus. Who goes to their bars and makes a mess of things and ruins the entire system of their global colonies. Those dang Americans ruined the Commonwealth. We ruined the Commonwealth, we ruined their Tea Party, and we ruined all of it. And they don't like it, okay? America's known for being a bit rebellious. And this is an argument, too, from a lot of countries that do have very strict interpretations of the law. Americans, you could argue, probably are a bit too loose in terms of how we enforce the law. Like in America, it's kind of expected that you can violate the law a little bit, right? Be honest with me in the chat. How many of you this month have jaywalked? How many of you this month have driven above the speed limit? How many of you this month have violated the law a little bit, not in a way that hurt other people, but, you know, a little bit, right? We're like that as a country. we, you know what I mean? Like, the laws are a little flexible, and that's how we like it here. If you go to Europe, I experience this when I travel to Europe. I know what it's like, and it drives me nuts. When you're in Europe, every rule, not even just laws, but like rules, are enforced to the T. If you go to France, if you go to the UK, if you go to Italy, they're really like this for some reason. Every single thing is enforced to the maximum extent. Have any of you tried like navigating an Italian airport or like bus system? It is a nightmare. They are so strict with everything. It's like you feel that like you have no freedom. It's horrible, like for me at least, right? And that is because the American character likes to be able to have some flexibility with how we violate small rules. It's how we are as a people. It's just how we are. I can't handle it, you know? Like I enjoy traveling as a tourist to those countries. I could never live there because I like to have, I feel that when I can't violate some tiny rules, that my freedom is being constricted and I feel like I'm losing my mind. I could not live like that. But that is the difference in our cultures, okay? Now look, another topic though, something big just happened. California has lost a major case on hiding gender transition stuff from parents. And this ties into a bigger thing too, because this ties into, you know, to what extent do children belong to parents? Whose kids are they? Are they your kids or are they the children of the state? This is a big argument that goes really far beyond the arguments on trans policies and everything else. Just the News said this. It says U.S. District Judge Roger Benitez ordered California to pay $4.52 million in attorney's fees to the victorious plaintiffs who challenged California's so-called gender secrecy policies that hide students' gender identity from their parents and force teachers to withhold that information. So you can have your kid and you send them off to school and you're like, bye, little Johnny. And you find out that the kid is not Johnny, it's Jane. From 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day while they're in school. And they come home and they take their dress off and they put the pants back on. And you're being kept in the dark about it. You don't know that your kid has transitioned. And you could argue, fine, the kid's rebelling. Maybe that's like the new punk, I guess. I don't know. Maybe those are the new goth kids or something, you know? Look, you do you. I don't really care, but it's not my thing, okay? You do you. The problem you have with it is this, though. The schools start to groom the kids when the parent is not part of that discussion. And they start medicating them. And they start doing like actual surgeries and pushing for like mental health services that begins doing things within the medical system that challenge parental rights over the medical, decisions for a child. If you are the guardian of a child, or if you're the guardian of an adult who can't make their own decisions, look at Britney Spears. That was a big argument, right? There's an argument over whether or not they can make their own medical decisions. You're right. You are the legal guardian. Are you the one who should be told about that, or is that have the schools overtaken that? Are the schools the legal guardians of kids, and to what extent? That's why this is such a big deal. That has now been determined in California. The schools can't block this information going to parents. It says Tuesday's order blames California's litigation intransigence for these staggering sum, which again they have to pay off. They have to pay a few $1 million on this. It's a big deal. This is a very big deal. Now, part of this ties into kind of the final death throes of the trans movement, and what's interesting too is you're seeing a lot less kids identifying as trans now. This does tie into some of the other arguments that it was working as a kind of social contagion, where one kid sees one kid doing, another kid does it. The way the kids were being kind of, I would say, brainwashed, frankly, in terms of, identity politics, was, if you're white, you're an oppressor, you're evil by virtue of your birth, and the only way you can escape from the generational evil that you've committed by something beyond your control, you're a man or you're white, and this was literally what kids are being taught. The only way you can escape that label is by becoming gay, trans, or becoming an ally where you bow down and say, my overlords, I'm sorry for harming you. And that's what kids are being subjected to. And so a lot of kids were, as a means of being allowed to have a voice, because, and this is real, if you wanted to state your opinions, if you wanted to make arguments, and you're a white male and you were like a fourth grader, they'd say, you're privileged. Don't tell, you don't have the right to speak. And so a lot of kids wanted to escape quote unquote privilege, which actually meant non-privilege, and become privileged, which meant ironically falling under the label of being persecuted or whatever. And then you could have the right to speak. And so a lot of them were declaring they were trans. A lot of them were declaring that they were like identifying as something other than what they were, because they wanted to have the right to speak. They wanted to have attention. They wanted to have visibility. And they were being denied that unless they did that. You now see that now this system is kind of rooted out. That odd condition is being removed. And the kids are doing it less. James Dyson is saying, Josh, what about white female kids? Yeah, I mean, they were facing the same thing. I'm talking about the tiers, right? So the tier of gender politics is, male, female, white. I think Asians were kind of like grouped in with white eventually, although lower on the tier, but they started, if you read like some of the major news outlets, they were labeling Asians as white for some reason, right? What the heck? Then you have like, brown, black, and then you have gender politics, I don't know, bi, gay, trans, and then like transhuman and stuff like that. And so they have this whole like tiered system of how this all worked. So the women would have power over the men because of gender politics, because they determine that men have power over women, so women should be given power over men for the sake of equity. And so white girls would get power over white men, but not against other races, because of the way the whole tiered system they created worked. And so that was like kind of the weird hierarchy they established. Now, in my personal take on this, I'm the father of a 16-year-old girl. I told my kid if she goes trans, I'm going trans too. I said I will put on a dress and walk her to school every day. And I nipped that thing in the bud. Tell you right now. She was like, well, I'll never do that, Dad. You got to move with the kids, make it uncool. And you start seeing it's a social contagion, right? Now look, something big happening today also. The Josh Philipp Show airs at 4 p.m. today Eastern Time, and I have a great episode about how non-governmental organizations have been able to become a pseudo-government. Huge deal, huge issue. Again, don't miss the show today. It airs at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. This is my new show, The Josh Philipp Show. Watch it on YouTube. We'll show it later on Epoch TV, but watch it on YouTube and make sure you subscribe. Let me show you the trailer for this. For decades, the U.S. government outsourced huge chunks of its foreign policy and even domestic influence to NGOs. These are non-governmental organizations that sound independent, but often run on your tax dollar with basically no accountability. Now, in some cases, they built schools abroad, but they've also done things like flagging so-called disinformation for social media takedowns. In other cases, they've even facilitated mass migration networks, and even other networks abroad have funneled money towards protests or propaganda right here in the United States, tied in with adversaries like China. So the catch? When the Constitution blocks the government from doing things directly, like censoring speech or facilitating mass migration, what they've been doing is just handing it off to these groups. But in 2025, that loophole got slammed shut. Alongside investigations into billions in waste, the Trump team has been canceling these programs in droves, shutting down parts of agencies, rewriting the rules in many cases. And under this new system being formed, American aid now has to serve American interests first. So again, important topic today. Basically, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, they've been able to gain a kind of semi-government power, which is weird because they're called non-governmental organizations, right? This is a very important topic. It shows kind of a different side of international politics. I will show you the real information on this, how the system works, how it's being deployed, how the whole thing goes. Don't miss the episode today. It's going to be 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, the Josh Philipp Show on YouTube. I have the link in the chat, so don't miss it. And again, also, please don't forget to like and subscribe. This is my new show. Airs once a week, and I think you all really like it. That said, thank you all so much. Enjoy your weekend. Happy early Easter, because I won't see you over the weekend. Have a good Easter. I'm going to go hang out with my dad this weekend, so enjoy yours as well. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free.